Good evening, everyone. This is KZFR. Thank you, Brandon, for doing that underwriting. Appreciate it. And tonight we have Jan Mathews with us. It's been a while since we've had you. I think it was it the last show? I think 2 shows ago.
I believe it was 2 shows ago.
Yeah, one more time.
I believe it was 2 shows ago.
We're doing a pre-recording, so we're sharing a mic, so it's going to be quite an adventure today. And we also have Brandon here.
Yes, I'm time traveling.
He's time traveling everywhere. So this show is called Write It on Air, and it's a show that basically I created to give writers a platform to air their works. I've said it many times before. I'm sure everyone's heard this, but I consider the show the frame, and the people who submit are giving me the picture for it. So you can submit online at my email, write.onair@gmail.com.
Yes, that is right. WRITE.onair@gmail.com.
We have a Facebook page and my Gmail, as I just said, and I also upload these to YouTube really pretty close after I start the show, or after the show airs. So today we have 5 pieces for us. You've lined up some really good pieces, actually. I'm really excited for these ones. Anything you want to say on them?
No, let's just get started.
Let's do it.
These are all from my first book of poetry called Often Overlooked. You can find it on Amazon.com. Search Often Overlooked. The first piece is a piece called Stoichiometry. I am a middle school science teacher. I teach some chemistry and some physics, some life science. And if you don't know what stoichiometry is, I'll tell you at the end. Give you a chance to look it up if you'd like. So, stoichiometry. Conservation of matter means nothing is ever lost, only changed in form. Connections to others amended. Everything is always somewhere. So let me be your garden now. Knit my ashes into the ground. Hem me in with shovels. Soak the soil well with morning tears and winter's morning drizzle. Let me be trampled down, deeper by the feet of joyful children, ours. Smile at their dances, weep and know, become certain the sun will never shine again. Then let the sunshine appear and warm your back as you scatter seeds in spring, invite the breezes to bring what it will, adding only newness to the garden, taking nothing away. Let growth occur, binding molecules in new combinations, never considered before. Welcome whatever comes. Rejoice in the perfect potato we have created. Watch and wonder what that purpley green prickly thing might be. Then celebrate the blossoms of the unexpected wildflowers, pink, red, yellow. Let the garden wilt and brown, but before you turn it under, gather seeds, scatter them to the wind, and know they are me.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah, Brandon and I have he has more of a science background than I do, but I'm always interested in it. So when we saw this piece, both of us were like, oh, this is going to be great. Man, I like this so much. Conservation of matter means nothing. Only changed in form. Connections to others amended. Everything is always somewhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely is my favorite word. I really enjoy speaking with you both because you get the top meaning and then you get the deeper meaning as well. This is a poem that was written after the death of a friend. It was written for his wife. And stoichiometry is the balancing of a chemical equation. So what you start out with, you end up with. It just changes form. So my science classes, shout out to my kids at CK Price. When we combine chemicals, we combine things like baking soda and vinegar. Most people have seen that reaction. And you get something completely different. You get a gas from a liquid and a solid. But the particles themselves didn't change. They just changed who they were connected to. And I think that this poem is a way of looking at what happens chemically to a person when they're no longer living. If you have ever scattered ashes somewhere, for me, there's great solace in knowing that they are still somewhere. Those particles that used to be someone are still somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really kind of beautiful the way you structured the poem, because it really does stick with the title, and that you do kind of see this reaction starting out and then working its way through the process and then ending up with the result at the end. And it's this kind of beautiful journey, essentially, of this person having their ashes spread over the garden, you then growing food and having your children play there, and kind of they become part of that.
Yes, it's a rather scientific belief,
Yeah.
but it is one that gives me great comfort. When I have lost someone in your living world, to have them somewhere else as a flower or as a bird, because their particles have moved on, is comforting to me.
Yeah.
Even, I mean, you said scientific belief too, but I think this would even fit in with most world beliefs, because the body itself isn't really often, not many religions speak about what happens to the body. They talk about the soul. So at the very least, the body here that is going back and being part of this cyclical process of life where it breaks down, but then it's renewed in different ways through the ground and through the things that grew up through it and through the energy that's there and through the kids that play on it. That is beautiful to me. I mean, it speaks to really anyone at that point. It's such a true thing.
Well, thank you. I have lost a lot of people in my life, and having some sort of way to remember them and imagine them being with me still is pretty important to me.
I like the very end too. I want to point out, let the garden wilt and brown, but before you turn it under, gather seeds, scatter them to the wind, and know they are me. There's obviously loss here. That's what you wrote the poem to be kind of about and for. But there's also this almost like a boomerang effect, like it comes back. They're never really gone. They're always there. If these matter, and if this matter is constantly changing and just cycling, it never really leaves. Correct.
The important part to me is when I'm teaching chemistry, we need to know where all those parts went. So having something that's more than dry chemicals in a Ziploc bag, expanding that to talk about all of us and all of the effects we have on our environs and what happens to us when we're no longer in the breathing form is interesting to me and a great comfort.
Yeah.
I love that, in the breathing form. I just wanted to point that out. That's such a great description for life. Well, that was your first piece. I think we should hop on into your second one.
All right. This is a much more recent poem. This poem is called Catch and Release. I'm not a fisherman. I tried it, and I'm not good at it. I much prefer just kayaking, but out kayaking, I do get a chance to watch quite a number of people engaging in the sport of fishing. So catch and release. In the stream of thoughts swift and fleeting, man with rod and reel and waders waits. Memories swirl and swim to the surface, boldly gulping air, diving back down, retreating deeper each time. Mind is patient, waits, baits. Another memory swishes by, glances, pounces, hooked. Feeling the familiar tug, he sets the hook and lets out line, pulling the invisible test, connected to my guts and shoulders, lifting and tightening. At first, I don't notice the yank, the tension. Then I try to ignore, but I'm caught, memory trapped, gripped by the mind. He plants his feet in the shallows and begins to reel it in. Fighting to dive deep again, it thrashes, fearing air, sunlight, air. I'm holding my breath, coming to the surface, memory exposed, true size and type confirmed, hauled out for examination, scrutiny, comparison, gaping and flopping. I exhale, drop shoulders, cut line.
I like that piece so much. I haven't done any, I don't know if this was this the description of fly fishing by any chance? Was it a specific type or just general?
I'm not a fisherman. It's about fishing. I think fly fishing is the one where there's a lot of motion above the surface.
Yeah, it's the one you're usually actually wading into the river for.
Okay, so I see all kinds of people fishing, little kids just wading in with a line, and then people who are a little bit more active and, they've got their floaties and they're out doing their thing. But mostly this was a poem about catching a memory and letting it get a hold of you and then realizing, oh, you don't have to keep it if it's unpleasant.
Yeah, and I think we all have those hooks, those catches, that's one song, the smell of some perfume, something that you'll just come across unexpectedly in your day-to-day life, and it's going to bring something back, and sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's not.
Correct. The thing that I really enjoy about this, I have a friend who, when we're talking and something happens and she realizes she can relax, she'll a lot of times it's via text message, and she'll send me a shoulders drop. So that's where that line came from. It's just that relaxing into knowing that a memory isn't happening right at this moment. Sometimes it can be very potent and can be very disruptive. And I do wrestle with some of my memories. So seeing it as being kind of caught on a line and still having a choice whether I reel it in or let it go I think our theme tonight is things that comfort Jan Mathews. So being able to let things go, realize that they do have a hold on me, acknowledge that, and then look at it, see if this is a keeper or not, and deciding maybe I can cut line on this one and not.
Yeah, and that's really true to life. We've all got those things that weigh on us we don't always need to cling to. And this is a beautiful poem about telling us you can just cut the line, let it go.
I like the piece too. There's certain parts on there. Another memory swishes by, glances, pounces, hooked. So we've talked about before on this show how certain combinations of words, obviously, and ways that you use them evoke or invoke. Maybe I think it's evoke would be the emotional one. Invoke is the picturesque one, I think
you're correct.
Yeah, I always get those mixed up. But what comes to mind for me is a river constantly flowing here, and these memories are constantly going by, and I feel that river is like almost time. And as you go through time, basically, it is that stream of memories that goes by, and then things just get caught randomly. So, as Brendan said earlier, there are certain things that just kind of pop up that you weren't expecting to. Oh, this memory just came by. Oh shoot! Well, I didn't really want that, and that's kind of. Oh man, I totally lost my train of thought there. I saw a word and I wanted to hit it, and I went in a different tangent. But anyways, I when I read this, I feel like there's a stream of time that's flowing by, and I see these memories as the fishes and stuff like that, and it's really beautiful to me.
Well, thank you. It's really interesting to listen to other people's interpretations, because I have obviously a very vivid picture in my mind of what this looks like. I know what place I was sitting in my boat when it came to me, and so to hear someone else say the river is like time, I think that's a really beautiful thing that you've brought to this that I might not have thought explicitly when I was writing it.
Yeah, and the part that like totally derailed me there was I read the two lines, pulling the invisible test, connected to my guts and shoulders, lifting and tightening. And I wanted to point out that that's really, these memories that you're talking about are ones that completely grip you and change some dynamic of your life. Connected to my guts and shoulders. It's not just a faint memory or something like that. It's something that really roots you there in that second and connects you like a fishing line completely. So when I read that, I was like, I got to say that. And then I was two separate thoughts went in one way, and that's why I got so confused. But it's such a beautiful piece.
Well, thank you. It's, again, I think we're talking about comfort today. And I think we're headed to, is this on knitting a beaded scarf?
Yes.
All right. Well, many of my friends have tried to get me to meditate. I'm a pretty high energy classroom teacher. So by the end of the day, perhaps Mrs. Mathews needs to chill, my students would tell me. Just chill. So tried meditation. It's a little frustrating for me. So this is something that I have found is a meditative practice for me, the art of knitting, because it's repetitive. And at the end, you actually have a thing as well. So this is on knitting a beaded scarf. Each stitch, a word I dare not speak, a single row, a stuttering thought, completed. Every little bump and ditch joined together by just the right amount of tension. Gentle pressure grips tenderly, strain taut just enough to hold, loop after loop after loop, row after row after row, links thoughts and feelings unspoken, gives recognizable shape to delicate thread. That yarn doesn't look like much in a ball, quite a tangled tumble, but unwinding slowly, hues flow green to gray to blue to ochre to tan and back to shades of gray again, telling an unexpected tale. This thread, feeling so fragile, flimsy, easily broken, even between skilled fingers, it dances, forms fabric. A gathering of glossy glass beads, so many shimmering gems, pieces of promises, stringing them together, a daunting duty. Mastering them requires spirit and focus, and determination too. Needles together with wool and beads. Centered to transform chaos into clarity, silence into a conversation, dissonance into a concerto. With time, with care, with commitment to the task, sticks and hands link words and beads, thoughts and wool, knitting toward freedom, creating order, fashioning beauty from potential.
Oh, I like that so much. I recently, I want to say last year, began knitting, trying to. And I made, I think, a square. That was my first thing.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And that took longer than I want to admit, but it was very worthwhile. So when I read this, I was like, I can relate to everything that you're saying here. Every stitch, a word I dare not speak, a single row, because it focuses you so much. You have to be really aware of the exact patterns that you want to do, and if you miss it, it all goes awry.
Yes, there's some truth to a stitch in time saves 9. This particular scarf, I have made 2 of this scarf, and one of the steps is to string about 500 pony beads onto this very delicate yarn. And if you don't have something on the end when you pick it up, off they come. So there was a lot of preparation and then knitting and passing beads onto your working stitch and making sure they're in the front or in the back according to the pattern. It's not the most meditative kind of knitting I have done there, but the project at the end is quite beautiful. And when I hold the piece in my hands, I remember what it felt like to knit it. I remember the feeling of those beads in my hands and how linking them together it's kind of magic. Knitting is like sticks and magic.
Yeah, it really is. I'm obsessed with just how anything is made, and knitting has always just kind of astounded me because you have this ball of yarn and this one string essentially that's coming off of it, and you're just weaving it into all these different shapes into this, hat or something, and it's just always perplexed me, like, how do you turn one string into scarf?
Yes, it's one of those. It's a skill, and once you have it, I have fallen asleep knitting when I'm doing something that doesn't involve counting or passing beads across the active stitches. It's quite relaxing and a very good way to, like you said, focus, and you are looking at one thing. So I think it's magical. Knitting for me is magical, and the sort of anyone else out there who knits who knits happily, not fighting with it, which happens. Some projects get flying lessons and have to sit on timeout for a while. But once you're in the groove and you have the pattern and you understand, you can start to see what it looks like, what it's going to be when it grows up, is quite magical.
I have to ask too, usually if there's a word in here that I don't know, I'll look it up, but what color is ochre?
Ochre is kind of a mustardy yellow color.
Yeah, I could not figure that out. I was trying to like put a reference to my mind, and I'd heard the word before, but I'd never looked up exactly what color. And I wanted to point out too, I think my favorite part in here is centered to transform chaos into clarity, silence into a conversation, dissonance into a concerto. I don't even want to explain it. I love that piece, that part so much in this. It's so good.
Well, thank you. Yeah. We don't have to talk about it.
Okay. That's it. We're done. Show's over.
It is pretty good, huh? It's a good spot. As a teacher, I talk for a living to young people, and sometimes getting the words to come out in the right order is an onerous task. The same can be said for knitting, getting the stitches in the right order to make it what you want it to be. And that's the parallel I was trying to draw here. I'm not a musician. I know what dissonance is, and I know what a concerto is, and I know their opposites. So that's how that got in there.
I like, though, probably most to me. So you start out from this position of center to transform, so you're focused on yourself here. Then it goes chaos into clarity. You're focusing on the piece that you're working on. And the chaos and clarity is more of a tangible thing, I would say. And then you change the description into a sound, silence into conversation, dissonance into a concerto. And that blows my mind. I love when there's descriptions that are relating completely different phenomena of life and unifying them together on one thing. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. Again, you are bringing much more to this than probably I consciously intended. And I love that. That is a fantastic thing for an author to hear, is someone say, ooh, this is what I got from this.
And that is what we have loved about this show, is getting to interact with authors and kind of make this a two-way street. You may write the piece, but readers pull a lot of things out of it.
And feel free to slap me if I'm way off point. I've had people write back to me sometimes and say, Kevin, that was a very interesting interpretation you had. Interesting is the only word I can use to describe it, though, because you were pretty off. So at any time, feel free to recorrect me.
Well, I like to write about things that are pretty easy to understand on one level, and then that allows people to bring whatever they want to it. You know, I write the concrete, and you bring the interpretation. And I don't think there's any wrong way to interpret what I write, because you're reading it with your experiences, and that's what gets superimposed on it. And I find that to be just a fascinating thing. And when I get to talk to people about what they hear in it or what they read into it, it gives me a greater understanding of that person as well as my own process.
I was just going to say that's one of the things that has really piqued my interest for writing, because I can put in what I want to show the world, my perspective, but I get almost more out of it seeing what the other person's perspective is. And if all this world is trying to figure out different perspectives and understanding, writing is one of those beautiful ways to hit that. So you said it perfectly. I was like, yes, please say this, and you did perfectly. Yeah, so we're running close to the end here. Got a little bit left, so I think we're gonna jump into the next piece. Anything you want to say about this one?
Yes. This poem is called Plot Twist, and this came from a meeting of teachers where we had a guest speaker who was an author, and two authors, actually, and they shared with us an exercise that they do in schools with students. And there was a call for words from the audience, and they wrote them up on a whiteboard. And it was just a list of words. And they said, oh, we need a place. Oh, we need a color. Oh, we need a fruit. You know, just all kinds of different things. And there was a list of words. And then without warning, she asked for a volunteer, handed the microphone off, and said, okay, now make a story out of this list in order. I did not volunteer. I listened to some fantastic, amazing stories using these words. And I'm not a story writer. Mostly, I tend to think in stanzas. So this poem came from a list of words generated by a crowd of teachers. Plot twist. Enough anger to fuel a rocket. She attended to the details, her seminal work. On her own spirit. Passionate about the minutiae, she felt her energy ebb. She wondered, what does a rainbow smell like? Sniffing the damp air for a clue, adjusting her cozy sweater and looking out the window of her brother's Jeep. She inhaled deeply, a bit too deeply, and coughed. She started the car. Its engine reminded her of her mother's blender and the concoctions created there. Steely Dan blared unexpectedly. She punched the power button and resumed her rumination. Rainbows smell like orange blossoms. Where had she last seen one? The last rainbow was in San Francisco, and the last orange blossom, that tiny town. Damned if she could recall its name. But the euphoria, seeing oranges growing on trees. Everything there was sunny. Even the ice water seemed tepid there. She sighed, her mood metamorphosis complete.
Such a beautiful little trail of thoughts. It's so good. Anything you want to say about it, Brendan?
Knowing that this is just from a random group of words, I think I can pick them out, but it still weaves together kind of this wonderful story, and it's almost weird. It's like I'm picturing like a rocket scientist driving away from the site and then just having a random thought about, what rainbows smell like.
Well, when you drive, you do have some random thoughts. So what words do you think? Are there some that pop out at you?
Rockets.
Rocket was one of them.
Orange blossoms. Rainbow, maybe.
Rainbow.
Steely Dan.
Steely Dan, definitely not my. That's not my jam. Cozy was one of the words. I think blender was one of the words, which is really random because I actually have a blender memory. I raised injured and orphaned wildlife, and some really amazing things went through the family blender, making food for some of the little critters. Sorry, Mom. And the oranges, my sister-in-law moved from the Midwest and had never seen oranges growing on trees. Oh. And so to take an adult out and have her be so, just because, here there are orchards with rows and rows and rows of trees. That was really a great memory to bring into this.
As long as we're picking out words too, in this piece, one of my favorite words ever is in there, and that's minutia. Mainly because some words, you can sound them out, you can read them a little bit, and it makes sense to read them. This one feels like it was driving somewhere, and it got in a head-on collision with something else, and that was the word now. Minutia. If you were to pronounce it out and without knowing kind of that it was a sh at the end, it'd be minutiae, I guess. I love that word so much.
And it's a great word because it's such a complicated word that means something complicated made of the little things that make something so complicated, like those extra letters at the end of the word, which make it so complicated to pronounce.
And also, this entire piece itself is a extraordinarily wonderful exercise for new writers and stuff. If you want to take some pieces and just kind of pick out some words and try to make a story with them and see what comes out, because you get practice one, and it really kind of gets your creative juices flowing, I would say.
I really agree with that. The writing exercises that I did when I took writing courses back in a long time ago, back in college at UC Davis, we did some writing exercises. One of my favorites was called found poetry. So you pick up a newspaper and you circle 5 random words and incorporate them into your work. We also did some work with the Oxford English Dictionary, looking at the etiology of words, the different ways words have been used and how their meanings have changed. And I find that to be a great exercise also for writers. If you have a word and you just like the way it feels, or you have a word and you really hate the way it feels, look it up and research it. Find out what it is about that word. See if you can use it in a way that you don't expect. For me in school, that word was wan, W-A-N. Don't like that word. It's just an ugly word.
Well, usually at the end of this show, we like to go back and kind of look at all the pieces again. But we have gotten very involved in the discussion, I would say. So instead of plugging my own show and stuff like that, plug some more about yourself.
Well, my name is Jan Mathews. My pen name on Amazon is J.E. Mathews. You can pick up a copy of Overlooked, Often Overlooked. Wow. They're on Amazon.com. The list price is $12.95, and I think it even works with Amazon Prime, so you can get some free shipping if you have the Prime.
Well, there you have it. That was J.E. Mathews. And if anyone wants to submit and be part of the show, like Jan was tonight, which tell them that it wasn't that hard.
It was not that hard.
And she's not just saying that because I have like a gun pointed at her or something. This was totally of her own volition. But yeah, if you want to submit, you can submit to me at write.onair@gmail.com.
That is WRITE.onair@gmail.com.
And I hope everyone has a great night. Thanks for coming, Jan.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.